The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Welcome to the Heart of the Matter. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. During difficult economic times, many people find themselves in a pinch, and they don't always know where to turn for help. Public policymakers talk of a safety net, but as government budgets feel the pressure, is that net still effective? Are faith communities and nonprofit organizations picking up the slack? Who is holding the safety net today? We'll start by visiting one area food shelf to find out how they are being impacted by these tougher times.
The Salvation Army as a whole has been operating since 1865. It started out in London, England. The operation here in Austin has been about the last 80 years. The mission of the Salvation Army is to help anyone who is in need based on whatever we have, that without any discrimination to who they are whatsoever. We provide rent and utility assistance. We provide food shelf for people to get assistance with groceries. We average probably about, individual people is about over 2,500 people a year, and that's for multiple services. Every year you're probably talking about 10,000 people. People that we serve that you probably could pick out on the street that yes, they would get help, but we also serve people that you would never guess would get assistance. You never know who's struggling, especially with the economy the way it's been, and the people who have lost jobs and who are struggling to pay bills and get things paid that have never needed assistance before. Things continue to get worse. Last year we averaged probably 200 to 250 cases a month. This year we're averaging more like 350 cases a month. Every year it grows. It's never been a year when the need has decreased, or the number of people we've seen has decreased, or the cost for services has gone down. Every year it increases.
Okay.
I think in the rural areas it's easy to brush away some things because we don't see it en masse like we do in the larger communities. We may not have the people that you would think primarily of being in the gutters or sitting on the side of the street or sleeping on a park bench. We're dealing with the same issues. We're just a smaller community, and so we're dealing with them on a smaller level as we would in the large communities.
Okay. Look there.
There's so many people who bury their head in the sand and don't think that it's going on because it's not in their face. It's not something that they see daily. It's not something, they don't see people digging in dumpsters. They don't see certain things, and because they don't see whatever it is blatant, they think that it's not happening here, that it's not a problem. And it is.
Food shelves are just one service that is affected by the increasing number of people impacted by poverty. National poverty speaker Bethany Tucker from the Ruby Payne AHA process joins me along with Wayne Stenberg from SEMCAC and Stan Groff, former Human Services Director in Steele County, to shed some light on poverty levels in our region, as well as services that are available to those in need. Poverty is something in the United States that has increased over the last 10 years, and we want to take a look a little bit at our part of the world and how it's been impacted, but let's start with some kind of definitions or how do we describe or define poverty? Stan, can you help us out with that?
So the poverty index is what's most commonly used, although there are several other measures. The poverty index has been around since 1960, when federal government economists figured out that among low-income people, about a third of their household income was spent on food, what they call the food basket, low-income food basket. And so from that time till this time, actually, the poverty index is calculated by the amount of money that a family, typically a low-income family, typically spends on food. The problem with that, of course, is that they did not take into consideration costs now like childcare, housing and health care, so that many scholars think that the poverty index is, if not woefully, somewhat, it doesn't measure true poverty, that the poverty level is much higher, actually.
It's much higher. Now, Wayne, at SMCAC, you deal with a number of different resources for folks. How would you describe poverty, and what are the impacts that you deal with? As Stan said, it's probably a little broader than it originally was considered.
The way that we look at poverty is a little different. Of course, we have the indicators that tell you if you can actually use the programs, 50% of the state median income, 100% of the poverty level. But really, it's the people. It's the stories that come in that we see. It's a missed meal. It's a hungry child. It's nights, at times sleeping in a car, moving from one relative to the next. I think these are the root issues that we see out in the field, and which really put our programs into effect, as it were. When they come to us, they're looking for help.
Okay.
And it's those types of stories that we like to share and to get our point across.
Okay. Now, Bethany, you are a national speaker, and today you happen to be joining us from Louisville, Kentucky. I noticed in our conversations before the show began, you talked about under-resourced individuals. Is that an official terminology change from poverty, or is there a reason that you use that specific term as opposed to a poverty term?
Thank you, Stephanie. When we use the term under-resourced, we're actually building on the definitions of poverty that have already been shared, and we're adding the realization that there are individuals who lack the financial resource. They're living in financial poverty. However, some of these individuals lack other resources as well. For example, an individual who lacks the financial resource and also lacks a support system, or lacks the emotional resource, or has few meaningful, mutually beneficial relationships, this person is living without other resources, or with other inadequately developed resources as well. Dr. Ruby Payne defines poverty as the extent to which an individual does without resources.
Okay. And is there a general cause for this lack of resources? What causes people to fall into poverty, or have they been there since childhood? Give us a picture of what it looks like in our region in terms of who are the poor and how did they get there?
I think there's a number of things that lead to poverty in itself. And when you think about it, the reason behind it, it could happen to anybody. It could be a loss of a job. It could be incarceration, the rising cost of basic needs. It could be a foreclosure on a home. It could be an eviction or a job loss. Again, as we visit with our clients and we talk to them about what's happening to them personally, what led them to poverty, I think it's crouching at the door of everyone, really, when you think about it, that it could happen to just about anyone, and we need to be mindful of that.
And so we have not seen poverty rates like the ones we have now since the Great Depression. In fact, the latest numbers out now show that about 50 million people fall into poverty in this country. That's 1 out of 6. And among blacks and Hispanics, the poverty rate, the official poverty rate, has climbed to 25%, 1 in 4 for blacks, and 1 in about 3 for Hispanics. It's about 30%, or just about.
And Stan, the new indicator, it went from 46 from the Census Bureau that just came out in September, and we're just about up to that 50 million, and that the old indicator is based on about 50 years.
Yeah,
it's an older indicator that they had. And one of the qualifiers in there, I think, was food. It was about 1/3 of your income went towards food. And in reality, right now, that actually is only about 1/7 in reality.
Okay.
So some interesting information that just was released. And what this new indicator will do will show the whole story. And what we're finding is the numbers are dramatically going up in some areas.
All right. And so we know we've been in an economic downturn. We know that times have been tough and people have lost their jobs. What kind of resources are available in our region in terms of agencies or government resources that are available to people who find themselves in this situation and maybe don't know where to turn?
Mm-hmm. Well, the ones that come to mind immediately are, of course, anyone can come to the County Department of Human Services in the county seat in which they live. There they can find help with medical assistance, they can find help with cash assistance for both families as well as single individuals. And then depending upon the area or the county, there's low-income energy assistance programs that I think you administer.
That's correct.
Food support, by the way, at the county. And food support, or what used to be called food stamps, is really a remarkable story in Minnesota. I believe there are now about 500,000 people receiving food support in Minnesota, or 10% of the population, and there are another 500,000 who are eligible who are not receiving food support. So,
and why is that? Why aren't they receiving it?
Oh, lots of reasons. I know that some people just don't believe that they are eligible. Okay. The food support or food stamp standard was recently increased by the legislature so that more people can go on it, but it's not that widely known yet. Elderly persons in particular are averse to coming to the county, stretching way back to the Depression. Yep. Stigma, and so on. But organizations like the Minnesota Grocers Association and others are actively supporting this program and saying, please do apply. Advocacy workers are beating the bushes trying to find people because we know that poor nutrition really raises the costs of other things like health care and education.
And education as well. Bethany, as you travel about the country, do you notice when you speak to different groups that really almost pride, is that an issue for folks when they know they're underserved but yet they don't step out and seek help? Is that something you see?
It is indeed. In fact, many high school administrators will tell us that the number of students who are actually receiving free and reduced lunch benefits is much lower than those who are eligible. Secondary students, because of pride and other factors, often resist actually sharing their financial situations.
All right. We also are in a very rural part of the country in our region. Is poverty in rural areas harder to see?
I think it's harder to identify because it's spread out, but it is there. It is very prevalent in the area. You'll find that people are doubling up at times, maybe families living together, people coming back home. You'll find that we don't have the transportation out in the country like you should to bring people in, and the resources may not be there for the car, for the gas that they need to have to get into a job. It is out there, and we need to be mindful of that and continue to do the work that we are doing to reach those people.
Bethany, as you, in particular, you work with a lot of educational institutions and who work with students and younger people. As school budgets and other government entity budgets are tight during these days, I mean, everyone is feeling the pinch. What kind of solutions are you seeing to still help provide services for those greatest in need?
That's a tough question, and indeed school districts are suffering because of reduced funds, and they're finding creative ways to provide services. One of the first services that they're trying to provide is to help educators to understand under-resourced students and to realize that their skills, their cognitive skills, their resources can be developed. And once we reach this realization, then we're ready to take the next step.
Okay. Gentlemen, locally, someone is watching, they know maybe their budget's a little bit tight and they're thinking, you know, maybe I do qualify. Maybe it's time that I reach out. Wayne, do they turn to your organization? Whose number do they call? Whose door do they knock on at this point?
At this point in time, we can go to a website that we have, www.semcac, it's semcac.org. That has a wealth of information to get people connected. We do have a contact center located in Moore County, another place to get connected, and I think if they connect with us, we can definitely get them involved with energy assistance, weatherization. We have our Head Start program. Our people at our contact center are well versed in all the different programs that we have. Senior dining is available. We also have Meals on Wheels, and we have financial literacy, and we offer that in Spanish. So there are a number of different programs that we can actually come alongside our outreach programs and to ensure that they have the items and that they need to get started.
All right.
Sure.
Well, Bethany, thank you so much for joining us from Louisville and helping shed some light on this topic. And gentlemen, thanks for being here in the studio. It sounds like there's a great deal of help out there to be had.
There is.
Government is not the only source of help for families in need. The safety net in our communities is often held by churches or other nonprofit organizations. Mandy Lighthizer-Schmidt from the United Way Mower County and Pastor John Lestock from Trinity Lutheran Church of Owatonna shared specific stories with me about families their organizations have been able to help. Well, we've learned a little bit in some of our research that poverty is actually increasing, and while Minnesota is doing better in general than the rest of the country, we've still gone from just a little over 7% to nearly 10% poverty rate in the last decade or so. And so that really has changed, and it's not going in the right direction. Pastor, have you noticed this and how it might impact the work that you do at the church?
We certainly do, Stephanie, in a number of ways. I mean, I will say Owatonna is a fairly affluent community, and there are a number of different safety nets, so to speak, and yet on the overall, we see more and more need here and there for whatever. I'm on the Steele County Food Shelf Board, and certainly our numbers of families coming in there are growing every month, every year. I mean, not always dramatically, but it's a steady gain. The other thing that we are involved with at our church is just an emergency fund, and that may be transients coming through town. That may be folks that really are just grossly behind in rent and paying utilities that are looking for help, but certainly we've seen a great increase there. And not just at Trinity, but throughout the rest of the churches in our community as well.
Absolutely. Well, I can speak for here in Austin and Mower County. You talked a little bit about poverty being at almost 10% for the state of Minnesota. Here in Austin, we're at 13% poverty, children in poverty at 16%. So we are absolutely feeling the effects of poverty on the rise. Many of the same things that Pastor John talked about in terms of food shelf usage being on the rise, general services, crisis, safety net, food shelter, clothing, those types of services that are in a greater demand, and not just by folks who are defined in terms of poverty at the federal guidelines, but really people who we consider to be working and working poor, who make too much to qualify for any type of service, but not enough to be able to sustain their daily needs. And when cost of living continues to increase, really one event such as a car breakdown or a trouble with a furnace this type of year can really set families back for a long time.
Now, Mandy, you're with the United Way, which does umbrella kind of fundraising. Do you find in these times that there are more agencies, more organizations coming to you wanting to be included in that?
We do. We are a United Way where we accept new programs every year. So we always see new programs, although our crisis programs, our safety net programs, food, shelter, clothing, they continue to ask for more money every year because they are seeing more people and they're seeing a greater need.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about maybe some specific examples, obviously respecting people's privacies, but stories that you can share that illustrate what poverty looks like in our communities. You guys are kind of on the front lines and you see those faces. You're not standing back looking at statistics. You know these families and these folks that need help. Give us an example of the really the greatest need that you are seeing out there when people come to the office and ask for assistance, or agencies give you stories so that you can determine funding. Give us some examples.
Well, Stephanie, one of the things I would mention is a thing we call Meals of Hope. And every Sunday afternoon, between the hours of 4 to 6, anybody can come into the church, no questions asked, for a free meal, and a great meal at that, I would say. But in the last 4 or 5 years, we've really seen those numbers skyrocket. And once upon a time, if I can say this, you might kind of predict who you'd see coming through the doors, and now more and more you can't really predict. I mean, it's younger, older, families, singles, you name it. And I think, especially in a small community where something like this is fairly visible, and there is a bit of a stigma of who's accepting aid. But to me, what this says is there's a need that goes beyond the stigma that, hey, this is no time for swallowing my pride, or worrying about my pride. I mean, I'm just hungry. I need some help here. So our numbers really, I mean, we began this thing with 4 or 5 people showing up. Now we normally serve between 100 and 150 a week.
Oh, goodness.
And on the one hand, that's very good that we've got people coming out. On the other side, it's tragic that we've got that many people that are in need of a meal.
Absolutely. Just in the last couple of weeks, we had a family come in, homeless. Mom and dad had both been working diligently, but hours had been reduced to a point where they lost their housing. And so they were working to get assistance, and they had been working through a couple of different agencies and were able to get into a home with their children. However, with the way eligibility works, you can't double dip. And so there was a 10-day span where this family was without housing. And so it was a real scramble to try to find a place for these 2 parents and their 2 children to go. Again, still working hard, just because hours were not guaranteed and varied week to week, and the cost of keeping insurance and daycare up, they lost their housing. And that's truly what we see when we look at our community. That is the face of poverty. It's working families.
Have you noticed with government, the discussion of government budgets and people talking about revenues, those agencies tightening their budgets, eligibility getting tougher just because of reduced government funding, has that placed a greater pressure on the faith community, on nonprofit organizations to fill that gap and to step up as that safety net for individuals?
I think that's certainly true, and I think there will be more and more pressure on that as the government continues to cut back on some of those programs. So, I mean, this is a hot conversation and a hot topic with a lot of churches in our area, and I would assume everywhere, of, how do we step in? And you may know, I mean, initially going back 2,000 years, it really was the church that was the safety net. I mean, there was nothing in the Roman Empire that picked up the orphan or the widow and that sort of thing. It really was the church, and more and more you hear discussion of that. The interesting thing will be to see how that plays, and if the average church is willing to pick up that role again. And as with anything, I mean, to do one thing, you sacrifice something else. So, but yeah, I have no doubt that that is growing and will continue to grow. And we hear a lot about this from some of our elected or want-to-be elected officials already.
I would absolutely agree. I think that the strain put on organizations because of decreasing governmental budgets is really great. Although there's also an opportunity there for us to collaborate and to work really closely with the churches and with different organizations to make sure that we're really doing things efficiently and effectively so that we can drive the greatest amount of service into our communities for the people who need them the most.
That's a great question. Do you think that more local emphasis allows those that are in need to have their needs met more efficiently, more effectively, because you guys are closest to the ground. You know what those needs are.
Well, and to not duplicate services as well. And I think sometimes, in due respect, even in smaller communities, I think sometimes, you know, because communication or cooperation may not always be great, you know, where we could do much more on a broad level, sometimes we get 2 or 3 people doing the same old, and so that's something I think we will probably all need to work through as best as we can.
And certainly could see what could be accomplished. You guys have done some great things there, and it sounds like there are some really wonderful things happening from nonprofits, from the faith community, to help be part of this overall safety net for those who are in need in our area. And I thank you two so much for coming in to share that with us.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been great.
While poverty is a growing concern in our area, it is also apparent that there are caring individuals and organizations, as well as government programs, who are stepping forward to keep that safety net in place. I'm your host, Stephanie Passingham. Please join us next time on The Heart of the Matter, where we will continue to explore the issues that matter most to you.